Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today, we explain Prophets Joshua chapter 19 in a clear and simple way, step by step. If you've been following along with our explainers on the book of Joshua, you know we've been walking through this massive ancient real estate distribution. And today we are looking at the grand finale. This is the exact moment where the map of the Promised Land is literally filled in, securing the borders and the homes for those remaining tribes. Now, to really understand where we are right now, we've got to set the scene. Imagine we're standing right at the tent of meeting in Shiloh. The entire congregation of Israel is gathered around. It's like trying to settle the inheritance of this massive, hard-fought estate among 7 incredibly eager siblings. You see, up until this point, some of the major tribes like Judah, Ephraim, Manasseh, they've already gotten their huge territories. But there are exactly 7 tribes left who are still waiting on their permanent homes. So right here at Shiloh, these final 7 are about to receive their land allotments to finally complete this giant puzzle of the Promised Land. Joshua and Eleazar the priest are right there, casting lots before the Lord to distribute these last pieces fairly and decisively. So here's our roadmap for chapter 19. First, we'll look at Simeon's unique share. 2, Zebulun and Issachar. 3, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. 4, Joshua's humble portion. 5 will cover some clarifications and key ideas. And finally, number 6, some practical life lessons. All right, part 1, Simeon's unique share. Let's look at this inheritance right inside Judah. Now, what's really fascinating about Simeon's portion is just how unique it is. Unlike the standard setup where a tribe gets its own independent, standalone borders, Simeon's inheritance is actually placed directly inside Judah's share. You might be wondering, why? Well, the text explicitly tells us in verse 9, it was simply because Judah kind of bit off a little more than they could chew. They had been given this massive tract of land down in the south, which was way more than they actually needed to sustain their population at the time. So, in a super practical real estate move, Simeon's territory is literally just carved right out of Judah's excess. It's a really incredible display of adaptability and cooperation between the tribes. So Simeon gets some key territorial markers, like the famous well city of Beersheba, along with Moladah, Harmah, and Ziklag. The text lists 13 primary fortified towns in total, plus their surrounding unwalled farming villages in the southern region, specifically out in the arid Negev, as well as a few other towns in a secondary list. When the text talks about towns and their villages, it's actually outlining a very specific ancient setup. You have a fortified central hub for protection and commerce, and it's totally surrounded by open farming communities that feed the city. This whole setup firmly secures Simeon's footprint in that dry southern desert, letting them peacefully coexist right inside Judah's broader regional borders. Moving on to part 2, Zebulun and Issachar. We are heading up to the northern regions. Okay, so the third lot comes up for Zebulun. Their border stretches to the ravine near Jokneam, taking in 12 towns. Now, interestingly, verse 15 actually mentions Bethlehem. But hey, don't get confused here. This is a northern town called Bethlehem. It's completely different from the famous Bethlehem way down south in the territory of Judah. After that, the 4th lot goes to Issachar. They get 16 towns, including the super fertile and deeply famous valley of Jezreel and Shunem. Their boundaries stretch out across these lush, gorgeous landscapes to touch the iconic Mount Tabor, and they finally stop right at the Jordan River. We're talking about prime, highly productive agricultural land in the north, which is a massive contrast to those harsh desert environments down south. All right, part 3, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. We are finally completing the map. The 5th lot goes to Asher. With 22 towns, their territory is basically this beautiful, sprawling coastal stretch. Their western border touches the majestic Mount Carmel and goes all the way north toward the massive fortified trading city of Tyre and the coastal region of Akshib. Right after them, Naphtali draws the 6th lot. They get 19 towns in the landlocked north, and they are safely tucked right between their brother tribes, Zebulun to the south, Asher to the west, and the natural boundary of the Jordan River on the east. You can see how the map is really coming together now, piece by puzzle piece. And that brings us to the 7th and final tribal lot, which goes to the tribe of Dan. Dan's territory covers well-known cities like Zorah, Eshtal, and Ekron, and pushes out westward to the coastal area right facing Joppa. But if you look closely at the geography here, Dan is getting squeezed into a really highly contested, narrow strip of land. It's exactly where the heavily armed Philistines were operating. Basically wedged between Judah, Ephraim, and those coastal plains, Dan got handed the ultimate bad neighborhood assignment. Because of that crazy geographic tension, we get this fascinating little piece of history dropped right into the middle of these boundary lists. Verse 47 clarifies what actually went down. When Dan struggled to secure their allotted land on the coast, mostly because those local inhabitants were heavily armed and definitely not leaving, the Danites didn't just throw up their hands in defeat. No, they marched all the way up north, way beyond their original borders, and attacked an isolated city called Leshem. They captured it, put it to the sword, moved in, and strategically renamed it Dan after their forefather. So even though their official assigned inheritance was on that rough central coast, their main settlement actually ended up way out in the quiet northernmost part of the country.
That brings us to part 4, Joshua's humble portion. Let's look at the leader's rest.
This brings us to a really crucial point right in verse 49. Let's read this quote together. When they had finished dividing the land into its allotted portions, the Israelites gave Joshua son of Nun an inheritance among them. This verse is absolutely powerful. It shows us that Joshua waited patiently until every single tribe was completely, securely settled before he took even a single acre for himself. Think about it. As the supreme commander, the top spiritual leader, he totally could have demanded the best piece of land years ago. He had the power to do that. But instead, he intentionally waited until the very, very end.
So, when it finally is his turn, what does he ask for? Well, following God's command, he asks for a specific town, Timnath-Serah. Notice, he doesn't ask for some sprawling royal estate or a massive, luxurious coastal mansion. Nope. He takes this humble, rugged little plot right in his own tribal territory of the Ephraim Hill Country, and he just quietly goes to work building it up himself to settle down. Then, verse 51 officially brings the gavel down on this entire generational process. It tells us that Eleazar the priest, Joshua, and the family heads finished assigning the land by lot at Shiloh, right in the presence of the Lord. And with that, the grand epic division of the Promised Land is officially complete.
Let's move on to part 5, clarifications and key ideas. Here's why all these dense details actually matter.
You might be thinking, why does the text spend so much time detailing every single border and town? Well, first off, it exactly fulfills the commands Moses gave earlier. This isn't just an ancient map, it's a huge theological statement that God keeps his promises, literally, down to the exact city and valley. Second, these massive lists weren't just drawn up randomly or, negotiated in some secret backroom. They were publicly assigned at the tent of meeting in Shiloh by Eleazar and Joshua. The whole process was completely transparent. And finally, laying out these exact recognizable borders, naming specific ravines and mountains, was just incredibly practical. You know the saying, good fences make good neighbors? Clear boundaries ensured long-term peace and stopped future land disputes among the 12 tribes dead in their tracks.
Which leads us to part 6, practical life lessons. Let's see what wisdom we can pull from these ancient boundaries. It's amazing, but even in a chapter packed with old geographical names, there is some serious human wisdom that applies directly to us today. We're looking at the true value of servant leadership, the patience required to wait for our portion, and how to adapt boldly when things get tough. Let's break these down real quick. First up, true leaders eat last. Joshua is literally the epitome of the humble leader here. There's that famous modern management book called Leaders Eat Last. Well, Joshua was living this out thousands of years before that was ever published. By making absolutely sure his people were completely provided for and safe in their homes before he even thought about his own needs, he proves that real authority is about serving, not just grabbing the biggest slice of the pie for yourself. Whether you're leading your family, your business, or your community, make sure your people are taken care of first. True legacy is built entirely on what you give, not what you take. And then from the tribe of Dan, we get a totally different but equally powerful lesson. Dan got their territory, sure, but the enemy chariots and the local resistance there were just impossible to deal with. But here's the thing. Instead of giving up and just complaining that they didn't have a home, they adapted. From Dan, we learn that when you face immovable, overwhelming obstacles in your own life, sometimes you just have to take the initiative and forge a brand new path. Sometimes the space or the situation you're handed just doesn't work out the way you planned, and you have to be bold enough to go find your own Leshem and build your future right there. All right, part 7, let's do a short recap of Joshua chapter 19. Here are the main takeaways you need to remember from this explainer. The final 7 tribes successfully received their inheritances through those lots cast at Shiloh. Simeon's land was practically drawn right from inside Judah's extra-large territory. Dan had to aggressively expand and relocate up north to Leshem after running into serious trouble on the coast. Joshua humbly took his own portion in the Ephraim Hill Country absolutely last. And with that final piece, the massive multi-chapter division of the land of Canaan is completely 100% finished. So as you reflect on the completion of this epic geographical journey, ask yourself, where in your own daily life can you make sure others are secure before claiming your own reward? And think about this. Now that the land is completely divided and at peace, what actually happens to the Israelites when they finally have to settle down and govern themselves without a massive war keeping them all united? Well, the answer to that might just surprise you.
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.